So I got some new parts for the yellow Mach 1. These are front lowering springs, and these are Ibach Pro front lowering springs. And the reason I bought these was because I already had one, and it's a very long story, but I had one that was broken, and I had one extra one. I was trying to buy just one, but I couldn't find them anywhere, so I just bought a set of the front ones. And the reason I had a broken front one was because the blue Mach 1 had a set of Ibach lowering springs that I put on it, but one of them was broken, and so I ended up getting a front set of SR Performance springs. Now these rear SR Performance springs are from my red Mach 1. The car had SR Performance front springs, and the rear springs looked like they were low already. I thought they were cut, so I just took the isolators out and they were fine. And so I had those left over. So I bought Maximum Motorsports caster camber plates. This is the whole kit here. And we're going to be installing all these lowering springs and the caster camber plates. So the first thing we're going to do is get the red Cobra out of the garage so we can get the yellow Mach in here. The Mach 1's looking good in the garage, and look at this wheel gap. I could stick my whole fist in here sideways. This is a huge gap. Everybody knows these look like 4x4s. Time to lower it. So the first thing that I do when I start the whole project is open up the hood and get some liquid wrench. I want to make sure that these top strut bolts come off easily. I'm going to hit them with an impact gun, but I want to make sure that I start soaking these quickly. I guess I could have even done this before I even pulled the car into the garage, but I just want those to spin off nicely so I don't have to drill them off like I've had to do in the past if they get stuck. So I got the car on jack stands. Always a good idea to have it on both sides. Made sure that the car was secure and everything was safe. And I had broken the lug nuts loose first by hand before I lifted the car, and then I just zipped them off with this impact. So that was easy. Now this tire had never been off since I've owned the car. They were a little bit stubborn. I had to kind of pound on the top of it there and knock it loose. Sometimes they start to rust to the rotors a little bit, but then I used the impact gun, and with just a little bit of back and forth, the nuts that hold the struts came right off. So that was really nice. I was happy that those came off. So then I was just disconnecting all the things down below here. The ABS sensor, you can see how many metal shavings are on that. I cleaned that all off with a microfiber towel, got that cleaned up. And so now it's time for the caster camber plates. Once I get everything out, these are the new pieces that come with the kit, and they have an orientation they need to be at. And see these two circle holes there? Those you have to draw with a marker. You use the old one, you rotate it 180 degrees, and you put it at the bottom range of movement and then the upper range of movement if you look at the other holes that I'm using here, and that gives you the two holes, and you're supposed to take a punch and hit right in the center of those two circles. I use this screwdriver with a sharp tip. It's like a removable Phillips tip. I probably should have used a punch, but I didn't have one, but this worked out nicely. I was able to pound that on and get a nice little divot there, and then come back with a drill, and I kept drilling it out bigger and bigger until it was right. So now the new plate fits up through the strut tower here, and what you're really checking for here is making sure that that new hole that you drilled is wide enough and where it should be so that this new plate can come up, because there is a new stud coming up through that new hole that we just drilled. So here's the first set of plates. I have them held up in there. You put washers down. You put washers underneath this too so that it glides nicely. It's all in the instructions. And my brother has the whole instruction video with my Red Mach one when we did this. So now putting the plates together, you can see there's the movement for, this is basically adjusting where the strut sits, back and forth, left, right, caster, camber, everything's being adjusted there. So then they have you zip tie the dust shield on the struts. It's the new one. There's new stops at the top of the struts and everything. So you put that together how the instructions show you, and this is what it looks like now. And you've got the bolts and the shims on top, the little spacers, and everything going together very nicely. So I did choose to keep the isolators in the front of the car. I just transferred them over to the front springs. I'm going to do no isolators in the rear. That's how I've done my other cars. And the springs do settle a little bit over time when you lower a car. The next couple days it will actually settle down a little bit lower. But I put the wheels back on, got the lug nuts all in there, and then lowered the car down after removing the jack stands. And I'm going to pull the car out, look at it, see how it looks now, and then I'm going to pull it in the other way so I can do the back side. So lowering the front of the car actually seems to lower the back a little bit too, just the way it works. And I think this is how my Red Mach 1 was. And on my Red Mach 1 I just took out the isolators and had the stock springs in the back. And so this actually could have looked pretty good, but I still had the new rear springs to put in as well. So I went ahead and did that. It's real easy on the back. All you have to do is support the car in jack stands, of course, take the wheels off and everything. But basically it's really simple because you just have to disconnect the bottom of the strut here of the shock, and then this quad shock comes off of that stud right there. And once you do that, the lower control arm moves down just enough that you can pull that spring out. And so they come out pretty easy. I used a big flat screwdriver to kind of pry on it and get it to pop out, and of course be careful when you do it, don't hurt yourself, but if you're very slow it just kind of pops loose. And then the new ones are a little shorter, so they go in a little easier, and when you have both of them in you can raise the axle up at the same time. Now comes the best part, the deep dish AFS 17 by 10.5 wide wheels. I've had these for a little while. These are the AFS ones. Late Model Restoration is now making their style replica ones, which is really cool. But this is a set of AFS ones that I had already that were on my Red Mach 1. And so I kept these because I always wondered if I was going to have another Mach 1, and sure enough I do. And so this is going to really, really make it look better. Now, something to add is when you lower the car like this, you probably should roll the fenders. Especially with me, I have a very steep driveway entrance. You know, getting up my driveway, it's like climbing a whole curb. The whole neighborhood's like that. It's how these newer neighborhoods are where I live. So when I go into my driveway, it really sinks the wheels up into the wheel well. The suspension travels a lot. So I did take a heat gun and I slightly rolled the fenders on the sides. I'll show you that in a video here when I'm done. But I wanted to use a roller. I couldn't get one on time. The guy that was going to lend it to me didn't get back to me, so I just did it with a heat gun and a towel so that it didn't crack the paint. And I used the towel with some pliers wrapped around the towel to slightly pull it in, and it did all right. It did okay. Maybe later down the road I'll go back and use a fender roller, but it's doing the job. It's keeping the tires from getting cut up. And while I was under here, I looked and noticed that one of the fuel line metal lines was popped out of its holder, and so I went ahead and secured that back in like it should be. So now it's time to pull the jack stands out, lower the car, and see how good it looks. I'm very excited for this. These cars look so good with these wheels on them. It's how I want all the Mach 1s to look. So there we go. It'll settle down a little bit too. So let's get it out of the garage and see how it looks. Here you can see coming out of my driveway, if I stop when the suspension's fully loaded, you can see here's where I rolled the fender. See, that's where it would be cutting into the tire. And over here on this side too. But now I can fit my finger in there, and the suspension is at full travel at this point. It's all the way in, so that looks good. Alright, so look how good this looks. I'm very happy with this. Car looks good. It's all lowered down. It'll be able to have a good alignment. The front springs do settle down a little bit. I'll show you some pictures here because I've driven the car around and taken some pictures in some really nice places. So let's enjoy how this car looks now. So the Mach 1 is just how I like it. Sounds great, looks great, drives great, everything's awesome with this car. I still have some things to do with the car, so stay tuned for more updates, but I am enjoying this as the ultimate daily driver.